All right, so I'm going to cover turning from basically from basic to advanced. So this might be something that you guys already know, but I'm going to cover it all just so everyone can get the most out of this as possible. So the first thing I'm going to go over is basic turning features. So basic turning features in FeatureCAM are going to be features from dimensions where you don't have to do any drawing, you just put in values basically. So we're going to do a whole feature. If I do a plain whole feature, I can hit preview. There's a preview of what the whole feature will look like. We can change the depth, you can add a chamfer to it, and you could change the diameter. Any of these changes that you do make will automatically be updated, and FeatureCAM will pick the most appropriate tools for those values. We can also change it to a different typed hole as well. So I could change it to a tapped hole, and then it defaults to a custom style thread, but we can always choose a standard thread. And then you can choose from the different categories of standard threads. Once you choose your category, then you'll be able to choose your size of thread. If I hit preview here, you can see how the hole size or the geometry of the hole changes slightly, just to let me know that it is a tapped hole. And then I can hit next to here. I could change the location of it, but I'll just hit finish. And you can see from selecting that hole, FeatureCAM has selected the appropriate drill and the appropriate tap. Okay. The next basic feature is going to be a groove. So same thing, you're going to populate the values. If anyone is not muted, could you please mute yourself? Thank you. All right, so we have some options here with the groove. We're going to do from dimensions because it is a basic feature. The location of the groove, you can choose ID or OD. And then the orientation of the groove. So x-axis is basically going to be your standard groove on the OD of a part. Face groove is going to be obviously if you're doing a groove on the face of the part, and then a back face is going to be on the back of the part or the back of a face of a feature on this. So if I hit preview here, there's what the groove currently looks like. I can change this diameter to 3 inches, and I can hit preview and update it. We can also play with our depth, so we'll do 1/4 of an inch. And let's also do our width of 1/2 inch. Preview that. Other options that we have is I can throw a chamfer on this. So I can go 20 thousandths chamfer on the front top edge, but we can also do a radius as well. So let's do a 20 thousandths radius on this back edge. If the groove has a draft to it, we can set that angle here. We can also throw a radius in the bottom of it as well. And then we can preview that, and it gives us a nice little preview of what our groove will look like. Then we can also change the location of our groove. I'll go ahead and throw that back here and then hit finish. So to see what we currently got, I can just do a 3D sim. We can see that there's our hole being drilled, and then there's our groove. The next feature I will cover is threading, so single point threading. It's kind of like the tapped hole dialog box. It defaults to a custom single point thread, but you can choose standard, and once you choose standard, we have all these different types of groups that you can choose from. Once you choose your group, then you pick your size. And then once again, you can do ID or OD. So I can preview this, and so that's currently what my threading operation looks like. If I hit next, I could change the Z location if I'd like to. And then we also have some strategies here that we can do. The nice thing about FeatureCAM when you're doing a threading operation is you can also tell FeatureCAM to rough and finish it to diameter as well. So you don't have to do a turning feature beforehand. You can just check those 2 boxes and it will rough and finish it for you as well. And then you can throw a chamfer on it. It's going to default to do a relief groove. I like to do a 1/4 inch relief groove. The depth is fine, and then you can also play with the sidewall angle. And then some options that you have with your threading is the feed direction. You can feed it towards the spindle or you can feed it towards the face by checking one of those buttons. The passes is set to fixed, a number of 10. And then if you don't like that, you can also do a calculated amount of passes, and then you specify what the depth of cut you want to be. And then you can also do multiple spring passes if you'd like. So I'm going to finish that. So there's our threading operation. If I go back to features, the next one is a facing operation. I don't think I need to cover that. That's pretty self-explanatory. It's just going to face the part, you know, pretty standard, pretty easy. We also have a bar feed operation. So the only thing you need to specify with your bar feed operation is if it's a bar feeder or if it's a puller. If it's a puller, you need to tell it how much you're going to overlap on your material and then how much it's going to pull out. If it's a feeder, you need to specify the diameter of where your stop is going to come to and then the feed amount. Remember, if you do use this bar feed operation and it's not working, it's not throwing it out in the code, that means your post isn't set up for that operation, so you just need a minor post modification to have that done, and we can do that for you. And then lastly, we have a cutoff operation. So with our cutoff operation, you can throw a chamfer on the top of it. So if you were going to say like part this to size, you could deburr the edge of it by knocking a chamfer on it. You can also throw a radius up there as well. And we could also transfer it to a sub spindle if we had multiple spindles as well. So I'll hit next, and then this is just going to tell us where the part off or the cutoff is located. So it's going to be at the back of the part. So then I'm just going to hit finish. And then from here, I'm going to do a 3D sim. So we got our drill and our trap, our groove. Now it's doing our threading operation. And then lastly, it's doing our cutoff operation. So we got this part here. It's got a chamfer at the top, nice chamfer, part to size, pretty good. All of this was done with basic features in FeatureCAM without having to create any type of geometry, okay? The next thing we'll get into is the next series of features within FeatureCAM, and that's going to be if you have geometry already created or if I brought in a DXF to create this turning feature. So if I go into features, I'm going to go to turning, and I'm going to actually do a face real quick. Make sure it's at the face of my part and hit finish. And then I'm going to go into features, and the next group of features that I can go over is from curve. So basically, once you have a curve created, then you can create features from that curve. So I'm going to cancel out of this, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a curve. So pick pieces, and I'm just going to create a curve like so. And then I'm going to hit the create button down here, or you can hit enter as well. Now that I have my curve created, I can go back into features and go to turning. Turn from curve. Pre-selects the last curve that I made. That's what it looks like, so I can hit finish. I can do a simulation. The simulation looks good. Next, I need to do this groove feature, so I'm going to go into chaining again and pick pieces. And I'm just going to proceed to create a curve for this groove. Hit enter to complete it. And then I'm going to go features, a groove. Curve 2 is pre-selected for me, gives me a preview of what it looks like. I can hit finish. I can also change the tools. So say for instance, this tool was too big, I want to go to a smaller tool. I can hit apply and it'll change those tools for me. I always like to preview. That's actually a best practice, previewing the tool real quick. It'll save you some time because as soon as I hit eject, it's going to open up the dialog and I can make any changes necessary to this. The other thing I like to cover is on this strategy for this groove. You can control the feed direction, so you can have it feeding towards the spindle or towards the face. And then the different cut types, you can do a depth first. So what the depth first is going to do is, the depth first is what it's doing right now. It's going to go all the way to the finish allowance and then step over and go over again. If I was going to do width first and I had a depth of cut set of, like, say for instance 100 thousandths, it's going to plunge down to my 100 thousandths and then it's going to go all the way across, and then it'll plunge down again and go all the way across. So depth first is going to go all the way down to the finish allowance in X and then step over and do it again. Width first is going to go all the way across first. And then you could also plunge the center first and then work your way out from there. With your finish pass, you can change the feed direction towards the spindle or towards the face, or you can just have it be opposite of the roughing operation. Okay. So now that I have these features pretty much done, I can go into a 3D sim, see how it looks. So my groove, everything looks good. So the next thing I can do is, I do notice that I have a bore feature as well. So I'm going to go into features, but I'm actually going to skip a step. I'm going to show you a shortcut as opposed to how I've been typically doing it. So I'm going to go features, turning, and then I'm on a bore. But then I forgot to create my curve, so I would have to exit out of this, or I can hit this curve chaining button. And so what this does is this opens up the chaining dialog and allows me to chain my feature on the fly. And then it'll automatically complete the chain for me and create my feature from it. And so on this boring operation, some options that you have is I can do a pre-drill. So I do want to do a pre-drill, but I want to see what this diameter is. And so if I just click on this geometry line here, down here in the bottom left-hand corner, it'll tell me what the diameter, it's 19 millimeters. So I'm going to do a diameter of 18 millimeters for my pre-drill. And then for my depth, I'm just going to go from the front of the part to the back of the part. And then hit next. And then we can hit finish. And then I can do my 3D sim. Everything looks good. If I eject out of this, so now I'm done with my front. So I need to move to the back. So I'm going to go into setups. And I'm going to create a new setup on the back. And then I just want to make sure that the Z is on the face of the part instead of the face of the stock. So anytime you create a new setup, FeatureCAM automatically puts the Z0 at the face of the stock as opposed to the face of your part. So that's the way I make sure that it's on the face of the part. So now that that's done, I can go into features and I can do a facing operation. And then I can do a turning operation with the curve chaining button. I can also do my bore. With the curve chaining button as well. With this boring operation, I can set a boundary as well, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Just so it's not cutting air, I can tell it that a lot of this material has been removed. And then lastly, I can do my groove with the curve chaining button as well. And change to, let's preview it first. And this is why I like to preview, because I noticed that I forgot to set it to an ID groove. So I'll go to my dimensions, set it to an ID. And then let's just pick a smaller tool. Preview this. Another best practice is if you hold Alt and hit the right arrow, you can single step through these features. It's really nice when you're trying to troubleshoot something to see what's going wrong with the feature. So that looks good. I can get out of this. Go back to setup 1 and run a final 3D sim. So everything looks good. If I wanted to see my ID work, I can go into Edit and I can go to Simulation and Round Stock, and I can do 3/4 view with lathe ID work. And then I can hit play again. And then you can look at it cuts out a little section so you can see what the ID work looks like, make sure it looks okay. And once again, that's in Edit, Simulation, Round Stock, and then there's 3/4 view. Okay. So now that we've covered basic features, so we've done from dimensions and we've done from curves. Another problem that you might come into is, say like you have a solid imported into FeatureCAM and you need to create turning features from it, but they didn't include a DXF with it, or you don't know how you would go about starting to draw this. So you could obviously look at the print and draw it yourself, but you can also extract a curve from this solid as well. So I can go into curves and I can do a curve from surface, and then I can do a revolve boundary. And then what I can do is I can hit preview, and that's going to give me basically a flat pattern of the edges of this solid. And it's going to default to a polygonal method. That works, I would say it works 90% of the time. The surface method and solid method are basically just there if this doesn't work for you. If this looks irregular, or if this is missing some profile features, then you would obviously use one of these other methods as well. And so we can see, if we just look at this part, we didn't realize that it does have a groove in there. So it did find that groove in the back. So it works really well by trying to extract the curve from the solid. And then another thing to do for sure is convert it to geometry, because you can't chain a curve. You can only chain geometry. So when you are to the point where you need to create features, you're going to want it to be geometry first. So if I hit finish, and then what I can do is I can hide my solid. And now I have all this geometry that I can use to create my features, like I just showed you in the first example, or the second example that I just did. So you would just go back into features and turn and curve chaining, and then start creating this just like I did earlier. If you forget to check the button to turn this into geometry, you can still do it after the fact. You just got to go to the Construct tab, and then you're going to hit this To Geometry button. So if I had a curve on the screen right now, this wouldn't be grayed out. This would be able to pick any curve that I have selected. It would turn it into geometry, and then you could proceed to do the same thing. So if you do forget to hit the To Geometry button, it's not a big deal. You don't have to start over and do it again. You just need to go to the Construct tab and do To Geometry. Okay. So that's nice if you're trying to extract a curve for turning features. The next thing we'll go over, I guess the next step in turning in FeatureCAM is using AFR, which is the main thing. That's FeatureCAM's selling point is being able to extract features from a model quickly and efficiently. And so I'm going to hit this AFR button and then hit next and look at the setup. I only have one setup created, so it's only got one setup listed here. These are all the features that it found. So it found a bore, a face, a groove, a hole, and a turning feature. I'm just going to accept them all and hit finish. And then right off the bat, I can do a 3D sim. And then FeatureCAM tells me that I have a gouge. So I'm going to click OK. And the first thing that I like to do when I see a gouge is I like to open up my results tab, and I need to see where the gouge is happening. So it's happening on my boring operation. And it looks like it's happening on the face of the part. So as soon as I hit eject, the first thing I'm going to check is I'm going to make sure that the face is on the face of the part and not on the face of the stock. Remember, I told you FeatureCAM will create a facing feature on the face of the stock sometimes. So it looks like it is on the face of the part. So the next thing I need to do is I need to troubleshoot what the boring operation is doing. So if I go into my boring operation, I'll slide this out of the way a little bit. And then let's zoom in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to preview this. I'm going to unshade my model so I can see what's happening. And then I'm just going to single step through what the boring feature is doing. So there's one of the roughing passes, and then the last roughing pass to rough out that radius. And then I can see what's happening is it's dragging up the face of the part to do its finishing operation. So now that I know where the gouge is happening, I can fix it. So I know it's happening on the Finish tool because I've seen it on the Results tab. So I go to the Finish tool and then I go to the Leads tab, and I can see that my linear engagement, linear in, is set to 0 degrees. So basically that's up the face of the part. So if I just set this to 10 degrees and hit apply, and then I can preview it real quick to make sure it looks good. And so now you can see I got a little 10-degree lead in right there, and then it's going to swing that radius. So now that that is done, I can shade my model again, go to a top view, and go back to my 3D sim. And I no longer have a gouge. Everything looks good. Okay. I'm going to move on to another part. So with this part, I'm going to do AFR again, but I'm going to do AFR on the front side and AFR on the back side as well. So AFR, those are all the features that it found. So I'm going to take them all and then run a 3D sim. So as this sim's going, I notice a few things that I really don't like. The first thing that I don't like is it's diving into this back edge. So let me show you why it's doing that. So if I go into my turning feature and I move this out of the way so you can see it, and then I go to my roughing operation, the reason it's doing that is because when FeatureCAM scans the model, it's just scanning the model and creating features based on the shape of the model. So to FeatureCAM, it's just following this edge and creating a curve. So the curve that FeatureCAM automatically created is following this whole model. And so if I look at my roughing operation, the undercuts is set to adjusted tool geometry, which means cut as much stock as you can without gouging the tool. So that's why we're getting a little bit of a dive in here, is because it's roughing out as much as it can without gouging the part. So we can fix that by changing this to remove all undercuts. So when I do that, you can see that this boundary automatically changes, And so now it's no longer going to dive, it's just going to cut back to here, which is nice because you can clear out some material, all the way to the back of the part. You do have to set that for the rougher and the finisher individually. It's not going to do them both at the same time, okay? So I can preview that to see what it looks like. So I can see that it came here and it ended right there, which is exactly what I want. I don't want it diving down no more. I can go back to my 3D sim. Much better. There's my groove, my bore. Everything looks good on this part so far. So everything's good on this part, so I know I can move on to my second setup. So I'm going to click on the setups. I'm actually going to put this in my sub spindle, so I'm going to check the sub button. And then I'm going to go to my 0 tab and I'm going to flip it to the back of the part. And then, like I said, when you create a new setup, it wants to put it on the face of the stock. So I'm going to do pick location, and then I'm just going to snap it to the face of the part instead. So now that I got my second setup done, I'm going to go into AFR as well. And because I have two setups in here, it just wants to know which one we're trying to do. I've already done setup 1, so I'm going to uncheck it. And so once again, like I said, AFR just scans the part. It doesn't, look at what you did previously. It's just looking for features. And so I know that I don't need a hole. The grooves are all done already, and the bore's done as well. So basically, all I need is the face and the turning operation. So I can hit finish from here, and I can do a 3D sim. And right off the bat, we notice it's basically doing the same thing it was doing on the front side. It created a curve that travels around the whole part, and so I have my tool cutting over here, which now it's cutting air. It's not even cutting any material. So if I go into this turning operation, what I can do is I can do the same thing I did last time. I can go to my rough and go to turning, and I can change this to remove all undercuts. But for this particular feature, that's really not going to work for us because we don't want to go over here. We want to end here. So that's where boundaries come into play. So I'm going to set a spindle side boundary, and I'm just going to click on this face of the model. And you can see that that dark blue line, it automatically changed to only cut to there. So these boundaries are really nice to use because what you can do is you could actually create a curve, and then you could use that curve multiple times and just constrain your tool with boundaries. So say for instance that, say like this was a casting or something, and we just had a little radius to cut out in here. I could actually set a face side boundary as well and go right here somewhere, because I know I'm only trying to rough out a little area here. And then I can also set a radius boundary. And let's go up here somewhere. So now we can see that our boundary box is just this little area here. If I click on my roughing operation and hit preview, we can see that it's only roughing out this little area here. So using those boundaries can come in useful and make things a lot easier, because then I don't have to modify my curve. I don't have to do a lot of different things. The other nice thing about setting a boundary is it's going to update it for the rough and the finisher. So if you were going to rough this radius out and then maybe you wanted to do a cleanup pass all the way along the part, you would have to create a different finishing operation that didn't have these boundaries set. Okay, so I'm going to unset that boundary and unset my radius boundary as well, so it's back to what I want it to be, and hit apply and OK. Run through my sim. Looks good. Let's do a 3D sim as well. So it looks good. Now we're no longer air cutting, and now the part's done. Okay. So next, what I want to do is, because I did create this setup to go to a sub spindle, I need to do a part transfer. So I'm going to activate setup 1 again, and I'm going to go to features, and in turning, I'm going to do part handling. And so I'm going to go do a slug transfer. So a slug transfer is transferring from the main spindle to the sub spindle, or reverse slug transfer is transferring from the sub to the main. And then you have other options here. You can do a bar pull, part support on, which would be turning on tailstock or a live center, port support off, turning off the tailstock or the live center, sending them home. And then you can also do a cutoff and an eject from here. So what I need to do is I'm going to create a slug transfer. So I need to tell FeatureCAM what the grab distance and the feed distance are. So the grab distance is going to be where you want to grab the part. And so the best way I like to do, I just like to grab a line, because it's kind of like an auto updating value. So if I wanted to grab here, I could just put the line here and look in the lower left-hand corner, and I can see that that's 2.9 inches back. So that's why I like doing this instead of doing like an interrogation and finding out an actual value. I like to do this when it, the position or where it grabs it isn't super critical. So I'm going to put it right here, and I can see that that's 1.7 about. So then I'll just hit escape to get out of that line, and I'm going to change this to 1.7. So the feed distance is a value from grab distance 0. So you want this value to be a little bit bigger, because what it's going to do is it's going to calculate from where the grab distance is going to stop, and then it's going to pull a number and start to feed from that area. So if I'm doing a grab distance of 1.7, it's going to grab here, but then I leave this at 1.25. It's actually going to wrap it onto the part to about right here and then start to feed. And what I want it to do is I want it to wrap it to about right here and then start to feed. So typically what I do is I'll just add 200 thou. So I'm going to change this to 1.9 and then hit next. And then we have some options here as well. Remember, I did a part handling feature. It's not necessarily just a part transfer feature. So you are going to have other features in here that really don't pertain to what you're doing, but you would use that same feature to do, to pull out the parts catcher. So maybe you were just spitting this part out into a parts catcher. And then there's an already supported. So that's if you're telling it that the livestock or the tail center is already on. You can also add some dwell to opening and closing. You can do some spindle action. So right now it's set to stop the spindles, but I could orient the spindles, or I could keep them rotating. Okay. So then I can hit finish from here. So now I want to make sure that this, that this part transfer is going to work. So I'm going to change my sim to a machine sim, and then I'm going to hit play. And right off the bat, I can see that I have a gouge, and we know why we have the gouge, because on my first setup, on that turning feature, I told it to go all the way to the back of the part by just telling it to remove all undercuts. Well, now we need to do something a little different, because we can't go all the way back here. That's where our jaws are. We need to stop short. So I'll go back into that turning feature, and we can use boundaries. So I'm going to do a spindle side boundary. I'll have it stop right there. So now the feature is no longer going all the way to the back of the part, and hit apply and OK. Do my machine sim again. So it's facing it. Now it's doing the OD, and you can see it's not crashing into the jaws anymore. Drilling it, doing the bore, doing a groove, and then it's doing an ID groove, and we have another gouge. So I can rotate this, see what's happening, and it looks like it selected a tool that's way too big, because if I hit eject and look at this hole, I can see that diameter is pretty small. So I just need to go into this grooving operation because I know I have a smaller boring bar. So it chose this normal size boring bar. So I do have some boring bars in here that are small, and I labeled them as small here. So I'm going to choose this one and hit apply. Do a machine sim again. So we're doing our OD. Then we're drilling it. And then our grooving operation is going. There's our ID groove. And so we're no longer getting a gouge. Now we're on to our part transfer. And so like I said, I'm using that best practice that I told you to single step through something. So it moves the lower turret out of the way, brings the sub over, clamps on our part, releases the sub, or the main spindle releases the part. Our sub spindle goes back home. And then I can zoom in here and hit play. And then it proceeds to finish the part. So now I know I no longer have gouges. I know that my part transfer is working. And so now I'm happy with this part. Okay. So that's pretty much all of the basic features that we have, that I like to cover in turning. So I did, from dimensions and then from curves, and I did part handling as well. Now we're going to move on to some more advanced, and that's going to be turn mill features. So I have this part here that I'm going to do some turn milling on. I already have a setup 1 and setup 2 created, so I'm going to run AFR on this. FeatureCAM recognizes that I have 2 setups created. And so I'm going to accept all the features that it gave me for setup 1. And then for setup 2, like I said, it's just scanning the solid, looking for features. I don't need this side feature no more, and I don't need these hole features as well. I basically just need it to face it and turn it. So I can hit finish. Here's setup 1. Go 3D sim. And so we are going to have to set some boundaries. But that's easy enough to do. So I'm going to go into my first turn feature and go to my roughing and then turn, and we'll set a spindle side boundary to here. And then set up to this turning feature. We'll go to turning and we'll set another spindle side boundary to be here. Apply and OK. And then 3D sim this, make sure it worked good. Perfect. Isometric view, so I can see that it did most of the features. AFR is not going to find these features that are around the index axis of the part, and so these ones we'll actually have to do manually. And when I say manually, it's really not manually. We're still using the model to find features. So I'm going to go into features, and instead of turning, I'm going to do a turn mill, and I'm going to do a side feature, and I'm going to extract with feature recognition. So now it needs to know where this feature is located. Is this feature aligned with the z-axis? So would my tool, when cutting these features, would my tool be parallel to the z-axis? And so it wouldn't. So I need to change it to be around the index axis. So around the index axis means that our tool axis is going to be normal to one of these surfaces here. So I'm going to choose normal to surface, and then I'm going to choose this surface here. So basically what we're telling FeatureCAM is the tool axis is going to be perpendicular to this surface here. And so then it will index this part accordingly so we can do these features. So what you can see here is this Z axis is my original, and then I have a blue Z axis here, which is a temporary axis for this feature, okay? And then I'm going to do automatic. And it found these two side features, so I'm going to do a select all and hit finish. Next, I want to do this pocket. So I'm going to go features. I'm going to do a pocket around the index, and it remembers your last orientation. So I can leave that, that's good. And then I'll do this one a little different. I'll select side surfaces. Add those surfaces in. There's my pocket, and I can hit finish. And then lastly, I can do these hole features. So I'm going to go into feature, turn mill, and I can do a hole, extract with feature rec. And it is around the index axis, but the nice thing with hole features in FeatureCAM is we can actually set it to automatic. And so it's going to find all the hole features that are around the index axis. Recognize and construct multiple holes. These are all the holes it found. So I'm going to do a select all, and then we can do finish. Then we can go back to our 3D sim. Looks good. So now that the bases of this part are done, what I can do is I can start to, maybe fine tune some things. So say for instance, this part was a production part, and so we need to cut down some time on it. We want to make as much money as possible on this part. So I'm going to go to the details tab, and I can see that my time is at 9 minutes, 25 seconds, okay? So I'm going to try and cut as many seconds as I can. As you know, in production, if you're making 1,000 of these, 5 seconds is huge. So the first thing I'm going to do is I know that I have a machine that has an upper and a lower turret. And so I'm going to go into my turning feature, and I'm going to go to my strategy, and I'm going to change my roughing operation to pinch turning. Pinch turning will allow me to rough more material more quickly and more efficiently. So I do pinch turning and hit apply. And what you can see is now it added a roughing to tool post 1 and a roughing to tool post 2. So if I go back into 3D Sim, I can see that I have 2 inserts cutting at the same time. Okay, that's exactly what I want. Another thing I can do is I can see that these holes right here, I have holes that are on both sides of my part, and they are 180 degrees apart, okay? So I'm going to open up my results tab and go to my tool post tab. And so what I want to do is I actually want to drill these both at the same time. So I can click on hole 3, and hole 3 is right there. And so then I can find the hole that's opposite of it, and that's going to be hole 8, okay? So I can see that as I'm clicking these, I can see that they're actually created exactly opposite. So this will make it easy for me. So I'm going to count how many holes I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. And I'm going to drag these 5 holes to the lower turret. Okay. Then what I want to do is I need to sync it up so that it's drilling the holes at the same time. You know, as the part indexes, we need to be drilling the same holes at the same time. Right now, it's not synced up, and that's why we have all these warnings. So what I want to do is I want to take hole 3 and I want to drill it at the same time as hole 8. Okay, so I select both of these and then I have a couple options up here. I can set my sync point at the operation start. So what that means is cut both these features at the exact same time, or I can set them to do one before the other. So right now it's saying set sync point to do hole 3 first and then hole 8. So those are my two options, same time or one before the other. So I want to do them at the same time. It moves the rest of the holes down, and so then I just need to set these sync points for the rest of these. Because I want these all drilling at the same time. Okay. And then go to my results. There's my center line sim. And then if I hit eject and do a 3D sim as well. Now I can see it's drilling those holes for me with the upper and lower turret. If I hit eject and open up my results tab and go to my details tab, I can see now my time is to 8 minutes and 41 seconds. So that's close to 40 seconds that I was able to shave off of the runtime. And so that's going to save us a lot of money if this is, you know, this is a production part. Okay. The last thing I want to cover is going to be some simultaneous B-axis work. So I'm going to extract a curve from this. So curve from surface, revolve boundary, hit preview. That looks good. Convert to geometry and hit finish. And then I can hide my solid and features, turning, facing operation. Make sure it's at the face and finish. And then features, turn, curve chaining. Go from here to here. And then I can show my solid. So I also have these pockets to do. So I can go features, back to turn mill, pocket, extract with feature rec, normal to surface. So normal to that surface, you can see my index angle changing. I'm going to use a horizontal surface, and then I'm also going to select this back edge as well. That's going to set the depth of my pocket. So add both of those in, hit next, and then hit finish. And then feature, side, automatic, select all, and finish. Okay. And then if I go to the top of this, I actually have a little bit of a tapered wall there. I don't know if you guys can see the difference there. So I need to create a swarfing operation. So I'm going to select all of these surfaces so I can do a swarf. Whoops. New feature, turn mill, surface milling, single, swerve. Finish, and then I always preview to see what's happening. And what I can see is the tool is coming from the wrong side, but that's an easy fix. That's the reason I preview stuff. Is I go to swerve and I can reverse my tool axis. I also want to choose a longer tool. So now I can see it's on the right side of the part. Looks good. Now that that's done, I have the exact same features on the other side. So what I can do is I can actually take all of these features and I can group them together. And then I can take that group and I can pattern it 180 degrees. So pattern, set up XY plane, 2 times 0 diameter, 180 degrees apart. So that front side's done. I just need to focus on the back side. So I'm going to go setup, back, pick my Z location on the face of the part, and then go features, turning, face, hide my solid, and go features, turn, curve chaining. Whoops. So that's done. So now I can show my model again, and I can focus on this here. So I need to select all these surfaces so I can do another swarfing operation. So Control R is a shortcut for a new feature, and it's going to be turn mill, surface milling, single operation, swarf, finish, and then I always do a preview. So that looks pretty good. One thing I do want to add though is I want to run my tool past the edge a little bit, and I actually want to pick a bigger tool. So I'm going to go to finish, and I'm going to go to my milling tab, and I'm going to set an axial offset of -1/100 thou. And then, like I said, I want to choose a bigger tool. Preview that. Now I can see my tools going past, which is good. Go back to my first setup, go to a top view, and run my final 3D sim. So roughing out, doing my rough turn, my finish turn, and then doing our pockets. Doing our rough turn for the backside. And then doing that swerve. And we're done. All that's left is these holes, but you guys know how to do holes. It's really easy, and then a boring operation. But other than that, this part is done, okay? All right, so that's all I have. So now we can open it up to some questions.